Landart is a 20th century art movement that originated in the late 1960s in the United States. It was part of the nascent artistic movements of the time, rebelling against the commercialization and institutionalization of art.
It certainly was a way to avoid painting and sculpture, or to go around painting and sculpture, because painting and sculpture, at least at that time, demanded a gallery to show it in. But the kind of work we did seemed to be antithetical to galleries.
My personal experience was that land art or earth art was not an anti-gallery statement or anti-gallerist statement either, but that a wide open space is really what they were looking for.
Beginning in the mid-1960s, a group of artists working primarily in New York City began to take up land as a subject, but also as a material in the practice of their art. Sharing overlapping interests with minimal and conceptual art, these radical, pioneering land artists sought to transcend the limitations of classical painting and sculpture and the orthodox parameters of making art for the traditional gallery space.
Was going to end.
It was outside the studio.
Changed the region of art, was flying by everything.
Our older tradition in oil painting by 3,000 years.
Ancient connection between earth and sky.
Also known as environmental art or earth art, the works created by the artists are inextricably linked to the natural landscape. It is an art that is created in a natural environment and exists in harmony with nature. Linked to the development of conceptualism and minimalism, as well as with the newly emerging political movements for environmental protection at that time. Landart is a reaction to the commercialization of art. The works reject their placement in a museum or gallery as a necessity for the existence of creative act and replace the exhibition space with the natural environment. Apart from the fact that the sculptures of this art are so large that they cannot fit in a gallery and therefore cannot be dragged into the spiral of the art market, they do something else. They become a counterpoint to all the ways in which humanity has learned to consume its nature in recent decades. Reckless exploitation, and almost always with the claim of indisputable economic benefit, which seems to justify all actions and decisions. Often, outdoor work is left to be altered and destroyed by natural forces. As a result, the term ephemeral art appeared. Sometimes the work is in the process of being destroyed for decades, but other times it can be erased even in seconds. The focus is shifted from the human being considered the crown of nature and is directed to the divine majesty of the earth and time, the power before which we are an insignificant speck. If the classical understanding of a work of art corresponds to the idea of permanence and eternity, the works described here explore the transience and influence of natural processes and time. Many of the first such works, created in the deserts of Nevada, New Mexico, Utah, or Arizona and destroyed by natural forces, now exist only as photographs and videos. This type of documentation is an integral part of land art. Immediately after the creation of the work, it is taken and the photo itself becomes a work, or at least part of the work that can be shared with other people. Many land art works require to be documented on video because time has a direct effect and changes the end result. Usually, those are pieces whose concept requires them to be realized through melting ice, water-soluble pigments, sunrises or sunsets passing through a specific place, water making its way, etc. Regarding types of interventions and materials used when working in the natural environment, it is common practice to use what artists find in specific workplaces. This is often the choice of location. These are generally natural materials such as soil, rocks, stones, sand, water, various organic materials, logs, branches, leaves, etc., which are simply rearranged, regrouped, or remodeled. In addition, the artists introduce the use of a number of production materials such as concrete, asphalt, mineral pigments, textile fabrics, etc., which integrate into the landscape. An iconic author who uses mainly this principle is the British Andy Goldsworthy. He directs his creative interventions in nature entirely to the search for harmony, working only with the conditions of the environment. A significant part of his work is ephemeral, aimed at studying the influence of natural processes. He makes snow pyramids, ice sculptures, works with colorful leaves, stones, soil. There is an invariable connection of the works with the specifics of the space and the surrounding landscape, due to which many works of the land art can be assigned to the category of situational art, site-specific art. A good example of such intervention is Christo's Surrounded Islands. 11 small islands off Miami, USA are surrounded by floating pink fabric.
In 1983, a Bulgarian artist named Christo and his wife Jean-Claude changed Miami's landscape culturally and literally when they created the installation now known as Surrounded Islands. 11 uninhabited man-made islands were covered with 6.5 million square feet of floating pink woven polypropylene fabric that would stay in place for 14 days. The original plan, Christo said, was a different shade of pink.
Space is entirely designed by the artist. Now, what myself and Jean-Claude do, we borrow that space and create gentle disturbances for a few days. And of course, many people try to stop us.
Among the most popular artists working in this field of art is the American Robert Smithson. His most famous work and perhaps the most iconic for the land art as a whole is the spiral jetty. The materials Smithson used to build it were rocks and soil. They were accumulated to form a long 460 meters clockwise spiral in the Great Salt Lake in Utah, USA in 1970. The changing water level determines what part of the work to expose. Smithson chooses this lake because of the blood red color of the water and the symbol of the primary broth that gave birth to life. At the turn of the century, Smithson's wife, Nancy Holt, donated the spiral jetty to the Dia Art Foundation, which manages the work to this day. Another landmark artist is Richard Long. He is among the pioneers of the movement. He creates sculptural works made entirely of natural materials. Look for simple, geometric shapes that contrast with the natural landscape. Builds lines, circles, spirals, and mazes by piling and arranging stones, sand, wooden twigs, or soil. He builds his works in various remote places, such as India, Bolivia, Peru, the Sahara, Texas, Ireland, and others. In recent years, Long has realized a series of performances in gallery spaces, where again with the same materials he recreates his works carried out in nature. Double Negative is the name of one of Michael Heiser's key works, created in 1969 in the Moapa Valley in Nevada.
Everyone was very busy in their studios at that time. I think everybody viewed themselves as an explorer. You know, we were artists, explorers.
It is a huge excavation in the rock, half a kilometer long, and symbolizes removal, relocation, and absence, both natural or due to human intervention. 244,000 tons of sand and rocks have been demolished, excavated, and relocated, and the excavation still exists today for anyone who wants to visit it. As early as the early 1970s, the work was donated to the Museum of Contemporary Art in Los Angeles. Andrew Rogers is another land art artist who creates works that would be best perceived from a bird's eye view. They are large-scale structures built of piled stones in various shapes that harmonize physically and conceptually with the specific features of space. As part of his spectacular Rhythms of Life project, Rogers is carrying out the world's largest modern land art venture, 51 stone structures located in 16 countries on 7 continents. More than 7,000 people have been involved in the project for 15 years. Other popular artists working in the field of land art are Dennis Oppenheim, Michael Fraser, Nancy Holt, and James Turrell. If you like the video, you can subscribe to the channel, like the video, or share it. This will be a sign for us that we are doing something valuable.
And we really thought that the work we were doing was going to end galleries. We ignored certain things. We ignored the gallery dealer.
It was an art that sort of took on the world. It took on real land. It was outside the studio. It had a lot of romantic aspects to it.
Another element that changed the vision of art was flying by airplane. So the idea of looking from the high level is changing the perspective of your knowledge about art.
Our older tradition than oil painting by 3,000 years.
There's always this ancient connection between earth and sky, and the human body trying to fly, which is a God, attitude. The change is the sky was controlling you, now you want to control the sky.